Go ahead and start the stream. Okay. Go ahead and start the stream. Okay, I'm posting the link to the YouTube stream in the chat. Okay. Okay. Hey, can I get another bit of just help with something? I'm gonna do okay, yeah. I'm posting the link. I still don't have this thing set up to the YouTube stream in the chat because I'm a dumb. Okay. Now I'm just gonna leave that. Okay. Okay, everybody. So you can hear me. Hey, can I get another? Let's go with the approach I think we need to take today. Okay, yeah. Post is, if you got something to say, chat it in the comment. I think it's going to be the best way. A couple of quick things. So everybody by now should have watched The Social Dilemma. I decided, I don't know if I've reused the one on the bottom, the meme on the bottom. Does that look familiar? It just seemed really, really relevant to the social dilemma, which is kind of our topic. And I wanted to also I'm just doing a quick double check on the thing. Today, I think we've only got 5 more weeks. Social dilemma, yeah, and then social media. Wow, that was, I guess we didn't really kind of get to that. We had spring break, and we're talking about open source. So I think what we're going to do, we're sort of backfilling a few things. Did we? Let me see. Yeah, we're all messed up on the schedule. It's okay. Let me see what to hit. I want to talk a little bit about the social dilemma and social media, and then we'll kind of catch up on that one, and we can sort of come back to open source, which puts us about a week behind, but I'm not super concerned. We need to pick a day when we can talk about the cuckoo's egg. Did we talk about the cuckoo's egg? I don't feel like we did. Okay, yeah, all right. I definitely want to talk about that. And like I said, we're having conversations, and the way that I'm approaching this is the conversations are just kind of for sort of mutual edification. Still continue with whatever the reading is for a given day, do the reading, do the writing assignments, just continue to plug along, and then we're going to sort of show up and talk about different things. It would be like cooler if it was all in lockstep, but it is what it is. And let's see, I definitely want to get to intellectual property. So next week we'll talk about intellectual property for the 2 days. And then I'm not sure what we're going to do with writing workshops. We might skip that. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We're just playing by Playing it by the ears. All right. So I wanted to know just kind of first impressions. I don't know what the percentage is of people who watched The Social Dilemma. Let me just look real quick. We had, oh, thanks for signing roll today. I got 3, 6. Yeah, we have 30. I don't know how many students are in the class, but we have 36 that have watched it. Yeah, or at least said they watched it. 36 watched it. And I wanted to know just impressions. Just start with that. That's kind of our sort of unofficial starting survey is what was your kind of overwhelming impressions? I have my own impressions, but I want to start with yours. Daniel said, thought it was interesting. Some of the dramatized parts made me laugh. Yeah, same, right? I liked the fact, speaking of that, Daniel, I liked the fact that they were, I've often talked about being a radical centrist, you know, and I really do kind of feel that way quite a bit, like a radical centrist. I'm an independent politically. I pertain to no party. And there's something interesting that happens emotionally and mentally when you take off the team jersey, I've discovered. And I feel like it is a cool, because there's an emotional thing that happens when the team jerseys are on that you don't see a foul. It's like sports. We're in March Madness now. It's like in sports, you don't see a foul the same way, when you got the team jersey on. So I find that interesting. Let me see what else. Um, Dave, I had seen it before, but both times it made me want to throw my phone in a river. I usually think it's pretty creepy. Havoc. I think it has some truths, but definitely think they over exaggerated some. Okay, so Frozen, would you please articulate, right? Because I think they did over exaggerate some of it, but the key question I think is what parts do you feel like they got right and what parts? You know what I mean? Because everybody over exaggerates part of everything, so there's no information really in that statement, Frozen, because that's true of any storytelling. So can you calibrate that? I want to understand better what your issue was. Isley, I'm happy I don't use social media anymore. Yeah, definitely a temptation. Matthew definitely got me to think about why I use social media and how much of it is intentional. Yes, yes. Brandon, I found the idea that they aren't selling your information, they're selling you. Very interesting. Mostly I kept thinking about the idea that an algorithm can only measure interaction. It can't make any kind of moral call on what type of content it is, thus leading to echo chambers, conspiracy type things. Yes, yes. I want to say one comment on that one, Brandon. I remember as the pandemic was happening and you had, people, remember that I have friends across the political spectrum. I do that deliberately. I feel like I can learn from all kinds of people. And some of my friends I think are crazy. Um, there's another one. Let me see if I can pull this one up for you. I shared this with a couple people on the weekend. I feel like this sometimes. Okay. I have friends that I feel this way about. Um, Not bad, huh? I have people whose opinions I really respect, others I don't. People I think are really intelligent and analytically sharp. Others I think could really use a stats class to understand how to sort of, and a predicate logic class in a philosophy class to kind of help refine some of the philosophical thinking. Some should watch the lectures on that we did on logical fallacies. You know, in fact, I think I may pull one up just to reinforce the logical fallacy idea. Um, anyway, yeah, let me get rid of that. No, but where am I going with that? Oh, I remember wondering about why it was that Facebook felt the need to police content, right? Like, why do you care? Just let people interact, let them naturally just gravitate, let people create their own echo chamber, right? And then if they want to just say bullcrap to each other, let them say bullcrap to each other. Like, right? Like, why do you have to suddenly now become the arbiter of truth and tell people, you know, go to my COVID page? Do you really think for my friends that are anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists, um, do you really think that posting that is going to temper their perspective? I mean, there's no frickin' way. All that happens is they go, see, that's how they get you. You know, they're just, all it does is reinforce, if you're a conspiracy theorist, given to that, and then you voice an opinion, and it might be, you know, batshit crazy. Okay, let's just say that for the sake of argument. It might be nuts, might be objectively false in some oracle of objective reality, right? And when you post it, this crazy thing that you believe, and then there's this little Big Brother like 1984 Orwellian little thing that just goes, this is not true. You know, imagine having a phone call. I mean, and I'm saying even if the bubble is correct, what I'm asking is, what do you think the impact is on the person who shared that in the first place? All it says to them is, Big Brother is watching. Yeah, see, that's how they get you. That's why they, you know, imagine that you're talking on a telephone call with a friend, you know, and you're just like, yeah, the damn government, you know, and then all of a sudden the line goes, and then and the voice comes in the line. The conversation you are involved in is illegal, or the statement you just made was false. Our fact checkers determined that it was actually a holding call. You know, my, you know what I mean? Our fact checkers determined that it should have been called pass interference, or you know, that wasn't a flagrant two. If you're trying to have a sports conversation, I mean, imagine how psychotic, how weird that would be, right? So why is this? And where I'm going with all that, and I'm going to scan down because the feed's kind of popping, but where I'm going with all that is I think that it's because Facebook understood that it had in fact caused the problem in the first place by feeding people the echo chamber that then allowed them to get radicalized. Basically, that they had set up the mechanism for radicalization, and then as a byproduct of that, they felt a certain responsibility, morally, ethically, legally, maybe, to remedy it. But now you're pouring gas on the fire because you created this radicalizing bubble, right? For example, we're going to talk maybe a little bit later if we get to it about cancel culture, and I stumbled on and it's been my belief that that the bulk of cancel culture in this sort of season of it, I mean, historically, it's all over the map politically. In fact, the first really significant cancel culture of which I'm aware of is McCarthyism in the 50s. Um, and McCarthy was a Republican senator. But, you know, I would say that the bulk of what we think of today in a modern sense as cancel culture is more of a leftist phenomenon. And then I stumbled on a Twitter feed over the weekend where it was obvious that everybody in the thread was in a leftist bubble chamber, and they were all talking about how leftists don't engage in cancel culture and how only the right does. Only Republicans and the right. And it was just like this, maybe competing big lies. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. But I think that Facebook was absolutely responsible for launching so much of that, you know, um, and therefore felt an obligation or a fear that if they didn't, there'd be repercussions to remedy it. And then I think poured gas on the fire and made it even worse because everybody radicalized who's told that Big Brother's fact checkers disagree with you. You really think it's going to help? I mean, there's no way in hell that that's going to help. All it's going to do is feed the conspiracy. Let me go back to the comments. There's been quite a few. See where we're at. Um, Let me see. Yeah, Havoc. I'm back. I am 8 minutes behind on the comments. Andreval, I like the part where they talked about how the inventors didn't have their own kids use social media until they're old enough to be responsible. Right? Yeah, I like that. Dave, the first time I watched it, I had a friend that I thought was falling down a YouTube radical rabbit hole. Fair enough. I feel conversations about the radicalizing power of algorithms helped him pull back from a radical whirlpool. Yeah, no, I think this is the kind of thing, and I'm still looking down, scanning down, Frozen, for your, further explanations, which I'm sure you drop below my screen. But I just want to say, Dave, my impression was there's a lot of people that this is really beneficial to just understand that you think you're seeing the world and you're not. You're seeing your world through a prism with your name on it. And, we've talked about this a little bit in the class, how when I was a kid, back in my day, that when I was a kid, there were 3 television stations, okay, ABC, CBS, NBC, and there were therefore 3 primary news anchors, Walter Cronkite being preeminent among them. And you got a news that was geared, all 3 competed for all of America, and you got relatively balanced news. CNN started that way, but I think became kind of a leftist black hole in the same way that MSNBC, I think, started out as a leftist black hole. Fox News started out as a right-wing black hole, and there was this polarization where news sources began to cater to a certain market. And I think it's really problematic when you reach a point where you are serving up the news that is specifically targeted to reinforce a worldview of a particular subgroup of the population. Now, some of that's inevitable because your own biases come rolling in. But again, everybody's got to work really hard to be aware of their own biases. It's very difficult. And that's why I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. If you have ever said the words, the world leans left, or the world leans right, you are part of the problem. And you're lacking self-awareness. Okay? Because I think as a radical centrist, my own perspective is that I'm right and you're wrong. Okay? No, you know what I'm trying to say? Um, the world doesn't lean left. If you think the world does, then you have a skewed view of the world. And how do you get a skewed view of the world? Stay in the echo chamber. Stay in the echo chamber of your own creation and get pissy whenever somebody outside your echo chamber comes and takes you on. The logical fallacies that fly in both directions are incredible. And the reason that we spent days talking about logical fallacies was to equip you to ask yourself the question, am I engaging in a logical fallacy now? Okay? I'll just tell you about one real quick. It was on Facebook, and a friend of mine, conservative, probably Republican, was making a post about something that I won't get into it, but it was clearly a sort of a conservative hot button, let's just say. Well, hot button in the news right now, but something where you would clearly say his perspective reflected, conservative perspective. He's also a guy with a law degree and is a logical, rational person who tries very, very hard to articulate with reason, the positions that he takes. He has a friend from law school, also a lawyer, also intelligent and logical at some level. But I have noticed this friend to be really, really given to absurd for a supposedly intelligent guy. And I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you honestly who the players were. You could switch the political persuasion, and I've seen that too. But in this case, just happened to have seen it this weekend. But basically, my friend says position plus rationale, and then the troll, his buddy the troll, the leftist troll, jumps in and just says, "Oh, it's interesting that you're suddenly worried about blah blah blah. Have you always been worried about blah blah blah, or is it only convenient now?" This is a logical fallacy. It's a red herring, among other things. Whether or not he's been interested and supporting whatever the cause was, beforehand. It's like saying I can't express an opinion about the Second Amendment unless I either A, own a gun if I'm a conservative, or B, have, actively protested against guns if I'm a liberal, or, that there's some, you know what I mean? It was an absolute red herring to say, and my friend basically responded, I think not great. He responded by saying, "Oh, and what's been your?" Now, at some level, it's fair to say, you know, pot calling the kettle black. But he was saying, no, I actually have cared about this issue. But a little bit from a defeating logical fallacies perspective, it's a little bit misguided because you don't really need to address the logical fallacy that legitimizes it. I think it would have been better to just say whether or not I've been involved or concerned before has no bearing on the relevancy of my argument. Why don't you address the actual merits of the argument I have put forward? Otherwise, if you can't, that's fine. But if you can, I'm still waiting for you to make a point. You haven't made a point yet. That's how I would approach that. As somebody once said, if somebody leads by calling you, an epithet, you can't legitimize their epithet and then have a rational conversation. Okay, let me see. Cameron, I think was crazy how they showed how they used post notification to make it so you'd come back to the app, and how much they were in control of when to show notifications. Right. And so one of the things that I kind of thought about with respect to that one, that will give you a tremendous amount of power over your social media apps if you choose to. Some of you, I'm gonna go survey. Let me see. I'm going to do, what's my survey going to say? The question is just going to say, I use social media apps at all. It's a yes, no question. So essentially it's just separating. If you don't use them at all, that's a no. If you use them in any way, that's a yes. I'm just curious because this evolves every semester. Okay, I'm going back. Back. By the way, before I forget it, I want to just, with the price of gas and some people with horrific computes, I want to just keep going remote for a while. You're like, yeah, Chuck, you always find an excuse. And yeah, that's probably true. Where are we at? Yeah. So what I was going to say, Jesse, is it's powerful to just turn off notifications. So when you go, at least when you do run a risk of getting hooked once you show up, but when you go deliberately of your own volition, even though once you're there, right? It's a little bit like, I don't know, take something that can be addictive like alcohol. All right. I'm not saying that alcohol is in every case addictive or that everybody, you understand I'm taking a tempered position on this. But imagine that you were, having a tendency and every 15 minutes there was Alexa said, "Chuck, you look distressed. You could sure use a drink." Imagine that Alexa said this, right, every 5 minutes. Well, you'd have a higher propensity to go like, "You're damn right I'm depressed. I'm going to go get a drink." And, so if you just turned off that notification, you'd go get a drink when you were deliberately motivated to go do it as an act of will, as opposed to being sort of constantly nudged into it. Does that kind of make sense? So I recommend with anything that you don't want to be pinged by, turn off notifications. That is a really, really big thing. Okay, Steve, the best part is where we discover why politics has become more and more polarized in the last 20 years. Yes. Yes. Okay. Steve's in the lead on the chat so far. You no longer have a majority leaning toward the middle and a few extremists. We're becoming more and more polar to the side we only get to see because the algorithms are doing what they're supposed to do, giving us what we want. Right. And we really, really want more than anything else is to feel right, to feel correct. Right. Remember the very beginning when I talked about the realization that you're wrong, should be the most thrilling experience we ever have. Right. Because you're on the frontier of learning now. You're about to embrace something that you didn't, that you can actually learn. Well, when you're just told constantly that you're right, you suddenly just can't even comprehend the opposing worldview. And therefore, everybody else must be stupid or misguided or some combination of the two, plus probably something else. Dave, would they have such a radical perspective without exposure to the content in the first place? Yeah, and I think that, Dave, I think the idea is, I think there would be radicals. Um, by the way, is my sound dropping? Are we pretty good? I just saw where Dave said that Wi-Fi, UVU Wi-Fi sucks and sound keeps dropping. Um, so Dave asks, would they have such a radical perspective without exposure to the content in the first place? Well, exposure to the content is going to be available in the world one way or the other. But there is a difference between quantity, frequency, pervasiveness, and when you've been fed a worldview that totally reinforces your worldview, right? And then within that bubble,
Just add
you
something to the
serve up
chat to that.
radicalizing information. I think you've tilled the soil a little bit, and fertilized a little bit, watered it, planted seeds. I think that's more of a fertile ground. It also allows much more because social allows much more connectivity between people, to a form by which people can actually come together. So I think it's kind of a perfect storm. That's my take, Dave. As we've talked about, I can be misguided in that assessment. I don't know, but I mean that's my best guess. Current. Um, let's see. Thought it was a bit much when the girl broke into her mother's lockbox to regain access to her phone after like 30 seconds. Yeah, okay, but here's the thing. Who is that, Jay? Um, Things like that actually do happen. There are kids who are so addicted to their phones, and the parenting is another whole thing. You know, I raised a bunch of kids, made a bunch of mistakes, probably did a few things right, but in my opinion, you can set a kid up, and certain kids have a propensity that way, um, to lose their ever loving shiz when you know. I mean, I know personally of situations where a kid goes nuts, threatens their parent with a knife, um, literally punches holes in the wall. You know what I mean? Like goes nuts when a phone has been taken away from a child. I know personally of situations more extreme than the one portrayed. So it was a bit much, yes, but it wasn't out of the bounds of reality. It was extreme. It was an extreme version of reality. Um, Steve responded to Dave's by saying, I don't believe so, about radical perspective without exposure. Steve said, because the more you see it, the more you believe it's the majority opinion. Right, right. Okay. Steve times 2 on winning the chat so far. That you start to believe that it's the majority opinion and you're right. You begin losing sense that there's a differing opinion, right? Now, I'll give you an example. I'll give you, I've already talked about, you know, um, anti-vaxxers, and that believing that there's a conspiracy, the so-called plandemic. And I'm going to make a bold statement. If you're sitting here believing that this whole thing was a conspiracy created by them, I think you're part of the problem and that your thinking is struggling. I'm just going to say it. And that's my opinion. And as we've talked about, I get to be wrong, and that as long as I'm respectful when I say it and we follow in the rules of the class, and you get to disagree with me. Absolutely. But the notion of a plandemic is just kind of conspiracy theory gone crazy. Having said that, I'm thinking about Hillary Clinton's statement that there was a vast right-wing conspiracy. She literally used the words, and if some of you are Hillary apologists, I didn't vote for her or the other guy, okay, in that election. But if you're a Hillary apologist and and you want to and you feel the need to explain what she really meant when she said a vast right-wing conspiracy, knock yourself out. But those were the words that she used. And my point in saying this is, like I said, I can't stomach any of them. But you have to live in a world where you're not talking, you're not interacting with right-wing people
Have a great
in a
day.
rational, respectful, and
Thank you.
dignified fashion.
Bye. Nice to meet
And the
you.
flip side goes. That's my point. The flip side is also there. The politicians get in a bubble chamber, an echo chamber. When President Obama said in one of the elections, talked about, or when Hillary talked about the basket of deplorables, when President Obama talked about Republicans who are clinging to their guns and their religion. These are horrible things to say. These are horrible, dismissive, lacking dignity and common respect. Okay, and again, and because we're rational and we've studied logical fallacies, you understand that this is not has nothing to do, with the a-hole in chief that we just recently, you know, got rid of. You know what I'm saying? You understand that I don't believe there's anybody who's done a better job of bringing, you know, lack of dignity to the Oval Office than our most recent departed president. So I mean, this is not an apology for anybody on the other side. I'm just saying, I can't stomach any of them. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to say that in order to say those things, you have to be what Steve just said, you have to be so wrapped up in that perspective that you just don't comprehend how a rational world exists in opposition to your perspective. And that's why that's why things like that slip out on both sides. Okay. And again, insert caveat, I can be wrong, you know, I mean, I obviously don't believe I am, but I would expect the same out of you that you wouldn't believe that you would say things you believe to be true because you believe them to be true. You don't believe them to be wrong, that's the beginning of a civil conversation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, the sound fell out. Did it come back? Yeah, Daniel said during that scene it might be more of a parenting issue at that point, right? That's kind of what I said. Oh crap! I'm like 21. I'm 21 minutes behind. I better get my game on. Be an all-star or something. Frozen said, I agree with the idea that it has begun to make a huge impact on society. That people behave differently now than they did before social media existed. I agree with that. At least, I don't think in the individual case that these behaviors didn't exist, but in the societal trend kind of way, I agree with you, Mr. Frozen. Ms. Frozen, I don't know who you are. Especially a lot of the younger friends I have, but some of the people made it seem like our world is doomed because of social media, and that the only way to fix it is get rid of social media. I personally feel there's some good to social media, and I agree, some good. I don't think that's arguable that there isn't some good. The question is, what's your threshold? That's the nuanced conversation. That is the getting rid of the black and white binary thinking, right? There has to be able to have nuance in the conversation. It's not all evil, but a lot of blame always goes to people who made it instead of putting blame on some of the users. Yeah. Some blame on the users. Yeah, thank you, Frozen. That's right on. Radioactive, a 13-year-old brother obsessed with TikTok, and this didn't seem very unbelievable to me. Nice. Nice. Um, Dave asked, is that an argument? Now, Dave and Steve are going to get into an argument about deplatforming. So I want to just say this before I read. I got to take my little sweater off. Before I read Steve's response, because Steve's ahead in the chat so far for the champion of the daily chat. I'm going to say, Dave, no, I don't think it is an argument. I think deplatforming is generally a really bad idea, unless you are clearly outside a reasonable Overton window. Like, I don't think there should be, um, well, I think there are topics that are clearly outside the Overton window. Let me just take, like, I would put Nazism and I would put child pornography as outside the Overton window. I think they are both so patently and objectively evil and destructive, but again, the question is, where then do you draw the line? You know what I mean? And also, what's your definition of deplatforming? Shouting somebody down, um, not allowing somebody in a civil environment making a civil point to offer a perspective, is in the broadest sense sort of deplatforming. Okay, Steve said, I'm under the impression that there's always an opposing opinion, and whether you can or would like to admit it, they have valid points of perspective. I agree. 3 points for Hufflepuff. I also think this is a good time to bring up people's metacognition. Everyone has their opinion because of their upbringing and those around them. Agreed. Just as you have your opinion, I have mine. Unless that's ever understood, there will never be an agreement on whatever subject we're discussing, right? And mostly what I think that does, Steve, is it brings us to sort of talk past each other. All I know is that you're trying to destroy America. All you know is that I'm trying to destroy America. And we're just like, just, talking past. Dave said, I feel that bots drip feeding radical content is a violation of free speech. Okay, now you got me backwards on that one, Dave. So anything you want to do to clarify? Um, I don't know why that's a violation of free speech. And again, we're differentiating. I'm not talking about the First Amendment, which means that government can't pass a law limiting your speech. There is a notion of free speech independent of the First Amendment, right? Which isn't guaranteed. For example, in the workplace, I don't get to come into the workplace, say certain things, and then just keep my job under all circumstances. There's nuance there. Anyway, Dave, you said I also don't think people would be as radical without algorithmic pressure. Agreed. I support trying to remove AI generated posts from social media. And I don't really consider that. Yeah, no. So I think, Dave, that has nothing whatsoever to do with cancel culture. I think that not really considering that cancel culture feels like a little bit of a coming out of nowhere. That's not what cancel culture is about, which we got to talk about. I don't know if we've gotten to the part where you've watched the CBS special on cancel culture. But, and then where there's also a difference, Dave, between AI generated posts and AI generated decisions of what to share. Those are two different things. So let's come back. Okay, so on the social media app, 16 out of 20 said you do use them some. Interesting. Daniel, gas was $8. That's more than it was in the movie I Am Legend. Um, Brandon, I don't know what the reference was, Brandon. I'm so sorry. I open Facebook Messenger if someone reaches out. Yeah, see, I do put notifications on Messenger because there are certain people that I communicate with, and same with text messages, and the same with email. But those are communications with people. Um, that's different than a Facebook notification because there's cats on a treadmill and I really really need to see it. Um, so Brandon, if you want to say more, I missed the anyway is pretty generous, and it was probably in response to something I said. So please help me. I don't want to just be dismissive. Sam, I realized social media was terrible for my mental health, so I stopped. Amen, man. Right with you, broski. That's something you got to be really, cautious about. I mean, there are studies that suggest a link. I don't know how careful the studies are and what they really kind of concretely say, but that deal with additional anxiety and stress and depression and things related to social media. So if the answer is you know get rid of it, then by all means get rid of it. You know, I mean, I'm right with you, Sam. And again, it becomes kind of a personal discussion. But I would say, okay, I'm going to do another survey because now this is for the 16 who said yes. Um, it's another yes no. It just says social media has some negative impact on my life. So yes means non-zero and no means effectively zero, close to zero. Okay. Now and okay, Steve, can you put that up in the survey? You can delete that one and put your end. There you go. Thanks, man. Um, the and I'm going to add to the. I'm voting with the yeses on that one. And the point just being that for those that are so I got 15 for the two no's. I think what that mostly means probably is that you have um, the two no's mean that you have and for the two that voted no, who are what Steve and Brandon. I'd love to hear your comment about that. My strong guess slash suspicion, what have you, on the no is that it doesn't have a significant negative effect on your life because you're managing it. You're being deliberate about it. Because if you're not deliberate about it, and this is the message of the social dilemma, different movie about Zuckerberg, but no, about the social network, social dilemma, um, is that if you're not doing something, you're probably having a problem. And then Frozen also voted no. Um, and to the extent that I do manage, so I guess my challenge to the 14 that voted yeah, and I was one of those, the challenge to us is let's figure that out. Let's try to manage, as Sam said, let's manage to our mental and emotional, spiritual well-being because we're the only ones that can do that. Um, yeah, the problem, Steve, is that I can't hear the audio because of the audio connection. It would probably show up on YouTube, but not here. So actually, maybe it shouldn't matter. Maybe, yeah, the problem is I can have it show up on YouTube or in Discord, but not both because I'm dumb. Um, oh, Brandon, you had mentioned to put a Y if you use social media in any way. I open Facebook Messenger. So I don't consider Facebook Messenger in the loosest form, it's social media, but it's much more akin to texting, Slack, Discord, text. Okay. When I'm considering, so Brandon, I'm considering social media more like Insta, Facebook, Twitter. And then somebody Isley asked, do you count LinkedIn as social media? Absolutely. Absolutely. But, and then you said I technically do use LinkedIn to apply for jobs, internships. Right, me too. Still trying to get an internship. And then you said I don't really use any of the social media features. Yeah, and that's probably me as well for the most part. But LinkedIn is social media, but it does a lot less than Facebook and Twitter and those others um, to to create a hook. I think it's much more just like a professional resource trying to. I feel like LinkedIn has a bit more of a benevolent model. Brandon, the first reason I deleted Snapchat was because there was no notification control within the app. In other words, I wanted to be only notified when someone reached out to me. But unfortunately, they forced all the garbage get back on this app. Yeah, right there, man. Right with you, Brandon. I've never really, I mean, I've used, there was a phase when I did a ton of study for about 5 years on social media. I used everything, at least, not everything. Um, but I used, all the major platforms. I used MySpace just to see what it was. I used Snapchat, just to, again, to see what it was. And so I could get some sort of I just didn't want to be that one grandpa, the one, you kids with your technology. I just don't. Okay. I hope I never turn into that person. I think I'm well enough down the road that I haven't yet that I probably won't. So let's just hope. Um, Dave said, I think there's a difference between being able to find Mein Kampf in the library and someone or some AI sending radicalizing messages straight to your inbox. Right. Agree, David. And that's kind of what I was saying. I think that it obviously we've got um, some asynchronicity going on. Ultimately, Dave continues, ultimately lies told often enough change opinions. If they're sent under the guise of goodwill by your next door neighbor, more so. Yeah, I agree completely. Steve, but then we enter the territory of whose perspective of good. Can any one person decide what's good for someone else? No, I don't think that you can. In the terms of Mein Kampf, every single person can benefit from reading it, whether it's, well, let's not do what Hitler did, or some deep meaning for the individual in some other form. And I agree completely. So Steve is, we're far enough down the road here that I think we got to award the chat. Steve, congrats, man. You you win the chat so far. You made some really great points. Andreval is watching some videos too long. Shame. Brandon, yeah, from early on, I more or less used it as a tool. So I turned off a lot of notification stuff I didn't like. Use it more of a communication tool. Right. Christian, what do you mean when you? So Christian said I put a timer on all my social media apps. What do you mean by put a timer? Do you mean you set your own personal timer that when you start an app, timer goes off, you get off? Or is there some built-in timers of which I'm not aware? Or that you delete it when the timer goes off? So more words. I see Kristen's typing. Um, yeah, Brandon said, then no, I don't scroll on Insta, Facebook, right? Okay, fair. That's back to the survey. Andro, I'm becoming that grandpa already with new social media platforms that have come out. How old are you, Andro? 25? Yeah, Steve, I know I'm not normal in this sense, scare quotes around normal, and it's a controversial opinion. I value Facebook for the first reason it was created. I message family, keep up with distant cousins, cool things they're doing. Yes, and I'm right with you, Steve. There are things I see from I have this large extended family. I see things posted by nieces, nephews out of state, across the country, friends around the world. There's my buddy from Sweden on a bike, in a race in Copenhagen. That's cool, right? And there's no other way that I would get that. So I'm right with you, Steve, on. But then you said, I also remember when cyberbullying became a thing. Still a foreign concept to me. The only thing that makes your words, opinions, ideas is me. Why would I give any time or weight to an opinion that repetitively negatively affects me? Yeah. And I want to just say this about cyberbullying because we really haven't gotten into it. But the thing about cyberbullying, Steve, is that I have many books on cyberbullying. I've read many of them. Um, the thing about cyberbullying is for to be a victim, as with a lot of there are a lot of circumstances. And I got to be really careful so I'm not misunderstood. But there are situations in which victims of unfortunate incidents place themselves in harm's way. I'll give you an example. If you are walking across the street, there is no stoplight, there is no crosswalk, you're on your phone and you're just walking, looking at your phone while you cross the street, you have given permission to anybody on that street to kill you. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying you deserve to die. And this is the part where logical fallacies take over. So Dr. K just said that anybody on their phone deserves to die, and that's where people lose their minds. Okay? No, I'm just saying, and if I walk across a in a street in a crosswalk with a stoplight, okay, and I'm not looking both ways to see what traffic's doing, I'm also giving permission for somebody to kill me. Doesn't make it right for them to do it. They'd have to break some laws to do it. Okay? I'm just trying to say that there has to be a complicit behavior. So Steve started this by talking about cyberbullying. So if somebody starts in on you, everybody at school wishes you were dead. Okay, now if you're me, and you're a grandpa, I'm a literal grandpa, and you know, you got a little more, kind of perspective, age, wisdom. You're not as sucked into that world, and you might just go, bunch of asshats. What are you doing now? So, and that I think it kind of speaks to what Steve was saying. But if I'm 12, you see what I mean? Does that make sense, Steve? If I'm 12, it's a lot harder to say, well, they're just words, sticks and stones, and then you've got 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, committing suicide when they are sucked into an emotional world. But that's again part of the unhealthy nature. And there's no justification. There's no justification for cyberbullying under any condition. There isn't. And by the way, a lot of what happens when the Twitter mob comes for you is just cyberbullying. Doxing somebody is cyberbullying. There's no justification for that. Um, releasing the names, addresses, and phone numbers of individuals who donated to a particular publicly appearing ballot measure or whatever, I think is doxing and is cyberbullying and is not morally appropriate, in my opinion. Your mileage may vary on that. Um, okay. Yeah, so all I'm trying to say, Steve, is that it's easy for the grown-ups to say sticks and stones, don't worry about it. Much, much harder when you're vulnerable, when you're 12. Like the girl. Remember the girl in the Social Dilemma when they start making fun of her ears or whatever, and then next thing you know, she's in the mirror, and you're like, that's kind of heartbreaking because that kind of crap happens, in reality. That kind of stuff really, really does happen. That sort of self-image, manipulation, right? Um, Dave said, I was mostly trying to understand how far you extend your free speech absolutism. Um, I don't think free speech should cover disinformation farms that both create misleading content and play algorithmic games to get that content on people's doorsteps. So the so I agree with you, Dave. The problem is where the boundary is. Like what's a farm? And what's disinformation, right? So with all due respect to my friends, my conspiracy theory nut job friends, who thinks that the pandemic was planned by somebody, probably an ethnic group. I don't know, right? It all just gets crazy. But with all due respect, you understand that it is a possibility. I don't believe it for a second, right? Or the notion of I remember watching. There was a survey question. I don't remember if I was. I think I was reading about it where they were talking. It was somebody was trying to assess sort of like radicalization, and one of the questions of this survey had to do with whether you believed it was possible for the coronavirus to have been, created in a lab in Wuhan, China. Of course, it's possible. The operative word here is possible. Do I have any hands, on site, on the ground, in the building? No, no. Everything I understand about everything that happened in Wuhan, we do know that's where the virus originated in terms of humans. We do know that patient zero is in Wuhan. As far as we trust the epistemologists or the epidemiologists, sorry, and the epistemologists. Um, no, you know what I'm trying to say? There's some things that the science seems to suggest, but the idea that we can know that it didn't, that now you're propagandizing, because the reality is we don't know. So the notion of having a question that asks, do you believe that it's possible? Anybody with any thinking has to, in my opinion, has to be able to say, of course it's possible. Do I think it's probable? And on that one, honestly, I don't know. I don't even have an opinion. Do I believe the whole thing was planned for some stupid reason? No. No. Do I believe it's a plandemic? No. Do I think they are trying to take away my freedoms? No. It makes me insane. It makes me absolutely insane. But that's somebody in the name of science. Study shows. No, studies maybe don't show. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe everybody should study uh, empiricism. Maybe somebody should actually, like I know I have, check my CV. Anyway, oh man, let me see. Dave. So, yeah. So my point, Dave, was what is disinformation? That's the problem with what Facebook has done with the fact checkers, because I have literally seen with my own eyes, things that the fact checkers suggest, blah blah blah, and you're like, I personally know the fact checker is wrong, or my sort of educated, objective view into the thing, having done my homework, just tells me the fact checker's flat out wrong on that, whatever it happens to be, you know. Also, when the fact checkers seem to be consistently adopting a particular political perspective, you know what I mean? I mean, take on political hot buttons that are favorites of the left, and I don't think somebody show me, and I'm issuing this as a sincere challenge. I can show you a lot of fact checker messages on Facebook dealing with perspectives that are favored by the right. And if you say the right is anti-science, I'm going to say shame on you and Bill Nye, okay? Because I don't believe that for a second. I think it's equal opportunity, weird misuse of science by extremists on both sides. By science, misuse of science and stats and data and empiricism and every bit of it, okay? This is my perspective as a radical centrist. So please spare me the Republicans are anti-science. Okay. I again, you can say it, and I can disagree with you, and then you get to have your perspective. Again, that's our rule of engagement here. But I just don't believe it. Um, where am I going with that? But no, I'd be really curious to see a fact checking post from Facebook that in which the post calls out an anti-science position of the left. I've never seen it. So when you are in an anti-science position on the right, which absolutely exists, and then the little thing pops up, it's not helping you. It's not persuading you. Okay, when you see the bias, and once you go political bias, it doesn't feel like objective fact checking anymore, does it? So that's my problem, Dave. What is disinformation? What is a farm? What is misleading content? Then you'd have to censor pretty much every political speech ever given by anybody in like the history of politics. Every bit of it is misleading. Not every bit. There are rare exceptions. There are rare exceptions. And then algorithmic games to get that content on people's doorsteps, independent of anything else, I don't have a problem with. That's just called advertisement, and that's been around for thousands of years. Okay, Brandon, Android has some timers you can set in the OS to limit use. Nice. Andreval, you are old before your. I'm down to Andreval is 21. You are old before your time. Christian, you can go into your settings and limit how long you can be in an app. Once you limit that, you can't get back. Really? It's like so. That's awesome, Christian. I didn't know that, and I haven't used that feature on my iPhone. Um, yeah, Steve said, if you enter a construction zone without a hard hat, and you are right. Now back to my previous point, Steve. You are giving a brick, permission to kill you, whereas it's only going. Otherwise, it's going to stun you, knock you out, maybe, but it won't kill you, right? Dave, let me see. Yeah, it's okay. So Dave calls out Steve for deserve what you get. It's an expression. It just kind of means you really have nobody to blame but yourself, and you didn't have to give permission to the world to kill you. Okay, radioactive. Yeah, okay. Um, right. So Daniel, thank you, Daniel. For Daniel's got my back on Wuhan. Daniel said, just because something is possible doesn't make it probable. Right. No, exactly. The question asked, and I know you understand this, Daniel, the question asked, is it possible? And I just want to say, of course. Is it possible that I created it? Yes, it's possible. How probable is it? Very not. Very, very not probable. But is it possible? Of course. And if you're going to ask a survey question that asks about possible, you know, ah, ah. Okay, Max talking about the deserving. To lean into deserve. A person's on their cell phone driving, a person's on their phone walking. The driver would kill the pedestrian, but they're both at fault. Yes, I agree that there's varying responsibility. And Mac, I would, in that particular instance, put the lion's share of the responsibility on the car. You know, but I have seen people, crossing a road uh, at dusk or in the dark, wearing all black, paying no attention, and just step straight out in front of my car. I've had that happen. Like, do you have a death wish? What is going on here? And that in that situation, I would have to say, if I really, I've seen the limit. That's the limit of the function is end approach is stupid. Okay, but I'm saying individuals that have done that. I've also had people like just step out and then just go, oh. That's my impersonation of limit of the function is end approach is stupid. If I then slough into them, it's really hard, to say I'm guilty of vehicular manslaughter when I didn't even have I wasn't being negligent. I was somebody else was being grossly negligent. Put another way, um, so I have a motorcycle license. Somebody once told me when they got a scooter and were driving around Provo. I think true of Orem, but Provo is very much more of a college town than Orem, right? UVU notwithstanding, because UVU people are coming. Most of BYU's living, in that Provo area. Or UVU, you're kind of coming from a big area. But anyway, my friend told me that the thing about riding a scooter or a motorcycle is, he said, you have to pretend. Um, he said you have to act as if 9 out of 10 drivers can't see you, and the one who can see you is trying to kill you. And then if you understand that, because you've also seen cyclists, bicyclists, and motorcyclists do unspeakably stupid things that put themselves in danger. Okay, let me see. Steve, maybe deserve isn't the best word to describe it. Agreed. But if you know that statistically seatbelts save lives, but you get in the car and say, I'm not going to wear that because it infringes on my freedom, anything that happens to you in the event of a car accident becomes a direct result of your actions. Well, I would say an indirect. Or a justification or justice of the wrongdoing. Okay, yeah, I agree. Matthew, cyberbullying. I'm going to try to wrap up the comments here. We're winding down. Matthew, cyberbullying is definitely a real thing. In my mind, it's just an extension of normal bullying, correct? Gives people that bully a place to hide for kids. Yes. That can't be moderated as easily by teachers and adults, etc. Yes. Kids can be pretty emotionally insecure when they're trying to figure out life. They may believe what people say about them at a time when they don't have self-confidence. Yes. And they may be exposed to a lot of cultural dumb things and attitudes targeted at them that are less than wholesome, sometimes for the first time. Amen. That's right. Yeah, right on, Matthew. Right on, Matthew. That's just dead on. I think you're spot on. Having done, a crap ton of research in social media, cyberbullying, and what have you. Dave, responding, I think a faceless computer like GBT3. I don't know. Wait, I'm not sure. I don't think I know about that, Dave. So a link would be great. Actually, writing and publishing to social media and calibrating themselves by engagement is a good place to begin for calling something infamous disinformation. I agree. I agree with that, Dave. I appreciate that. Matthew, I don't know that I'd say they deserve it. Result of their actions, they have responsibility. Some responsibility, yes. Okay, Steve, and I do agree. It's foreign to me because for one reason or another, I had to have become secure with who I am. Wouldn't say I have much self-confidence. I think very little of myself. Steve, no. But I know my capacities. I think there's definitely a mental health aspect in neutralizing cyber/regular bullying. But I would also think it does reflect on the parents and the child's upbringing. Agreed as well. Agreed as well. If your child's 13 and has unfettered cell phone access, I think that's a parenting problem. I really do. I really, really do. If a child is brought up relying on the opinions of others, it results in a skewed perspective that they rely on the opinions of others. If they're taught self-confidence and to learn to value their own opinion before others, they have a better chance to combat and overcome that type of one. Okay, I'm just gonna give Steve a big hand. Just Steve, you won the chat. Solid. Everyone's gonna have to up your game. Um, Matthew, how we doing here? We're about caught up, almost caught up. Matthew, it makes sense that upbringing and what others think of you has a lot to do with it. It's cool that you felt secure enough in who you were that you weren't affected by bullies. But I think everybody is a little bit. I want to be really fair. I don't think there's really such a thing as a bullying environment where there's not at least some collateral damage emotionally. You know what I mean? There's still this aggregate. If everybody just tells you all day long, I really like your hair, I love that shirt you're wearing, or I had that happen. I was somewhere, I was wearing, it wasn't this shirt, but I was wearing this other shirt. I was in a restaurant and there was these two guys at the next table, and as they were popping up, one of the guys just goes, "Hey, I just really love your shirt, man." And I was like, am I like past that stage where I care? Am I slave to fashion? I don't know. But I do. Was he hitting on me? I don't know. But I'm just saying that it made me happy. It's just like, oh, I like this shirt better now. But you know what I mean? Or someone's just like looking at you and going, really? That's what you decided to wear to a restaurant. Okay. That has an impact, right? Does this shirt make me look fat? Matthew, continuing, definitely not healthy to base your self-esteem on what others think of you. Yeah, by nature, we all need someone's support and approval. I agree with that. We are social by our nature. We are social by our genetics. As humans, we are social. Um, Maybe if you're supported better at home, you do better in the world. I think that's true. See your own value. Yeah. Hunters, yeah, talking about Peru. I remember the most amazing things I've ever seen in terms of just pedestrians and bicycles and scooters was either Taipei, Taiwan, Or what else was insanity? That was insanity. Probably Hyderabad, India. No discernible lines anywhere. Okay. Andrew said, I told a roommate once who said we had the right of way as pedestrians. Right. Agree, legally. But that's actually not strictly true. I don't have the right of way if I'm just wandering out on the freeway. So, Andreval, you got to talk to your roomie. Um, yeah, that's right, Brandon. Brandon, the car has the right of mass. Yes. Um, I told him right of way doesn't give us the right to live if we're dumb and get hit. Yeah, no, that's right. So that's the whole thing. Your roommate Andreval needs to study the logical fallacies a little bit. Um, point being that uh, there's two separate issues: legal responsibility of who has to stop. And if I'm in a car, I'm two cars are there's a rules of right of way when two cars are at a stop sign at the same time, like a four-way stop. The guy going right has the right of way over the guy going straight, or somebody going left. There have to be rules because there's a contention for resources, right? There's a critical section in which there's resource contention. But if the two cars collide, it's like crunchy, crunchy, fender bender. But if one of them is a pedestrian on a bike, don't be an idiot. You're not going to win that. You're not going to win that one on the bike. Okay, Dave, thank you. I don't. Oh, wait. I think that. Okay, Dave. I think I may have come across this. Is it possible 15 years ago? The GPT-3. I think it was the first time they actually got a paper accepted to a conference. It was gobbledygook nonsense. Not a good conference. Yeah, I think I've been familiar with it. Yeah, Brandon wins honorable mention for the chat for the quote, and the car has the right of mass. That's right. That's right. Okay. Well done, Brandon. Okay, hey, we're about out of time. Um, yeah, what else? What else? Anything else to hit? I hope that was interesting, that the social dilemma. Um, how about this? I'm going to do one last survey to end on. Um, yes, no. Survey simply says, I'm glad I watched the social dilemma. And again, I'm not going to, on this one, I'm not going to look at who answered on the no. Okay. And even if I did, it would be okay. You get to have your own. And I'm clicking the yes, so you know how to suck up. You know what the correct answer is now, but based on what I clicked on. No, and if the answer is no, it's fine. It's really really fun. Part of it I'm calibrating. In general, I'm calibrating for the future. But again, I'm not gonna. Well, you know what? I might be back teaching this class on a as an adjunct. That is possible. Possible. It won't be. I don't know if it'll ever happen. It could. I enjoy it. And you guys are great. Your comments are fantastic. Like, really. And I want to just say one other thing because we got a minute. I just want to say I don't know who that is that's calling me, but I just want to say, um, uh, yeah, I just want to say, what am I going to say? What was I going for? Um, man, what was it? I've lost my mind. That's what I was going to say. I don't remember. I think I was just saying that I thought your comments on have been really good. Oh, I don't. I just wanted to say that I have really, really appreciated the whole semester. We've only got 5 weeks left, but I've really, really appreciated that we started off saying, look, these are the ground rules. We don't have to agree. We just don't. You can flat out take issue. You will never offend me. You're not going to hurt your grade. There's no canonical answer. Like you have to. And I really get pissy about professors who have a political or religious or any particular bias, and that the correct answer has to fall in line with their preconceived notion. Like if you go in and your teacher's a leftist and you come in wearing a Trump t-shirt and that causes you to fail a class, and then flip it. Flip it. Your teacher is right wing and you come in wearing a Biden shirt, you know, and that causes you to fail. It doesn't matter which way you do the thing. That kind of bias is just absolute bullcrap, and it's inappropriate. It's immoral. It's unethical. It is bad pedagogy. It's bad teaching, and it really pisses me off. As a teacher, as somebody that's spent the majority of my life teaching, professionally and in volunteer settings, it really gets my goat. If I had a goat, it would get it. Okay, it's not appropriate because that we've got to have an environment of respect, of dignity, of compassion, and then but we can also just flat out disagree in the middle of that. And the most exhilarating thing, if you can find friends that differ from you politically. If you're a Democrat, make sure you have some friends who are Republicans. If you're a Republican, make sure you have some friends who are Democrats. And when you know you've arrived at some kind of nirvana, you sit down with your friend and you say, your perspective feels so crazy to me. And number one, they're not offended by that. And they're like, yeah, I feel the same way. Well, would you be willing to just tell me why you feel that way and have an honest conversation together? It's exhilarating. And I've always come away with a deeper understanding and often come away with an adjustment to my thinking, a tweak. Everyone's like, no one ever changed their mind on the internet. Bullcrap. Bullcrap. People change their mind all the time. They don't change their mind from getting yelled at. Usually they just entrench. Okay, we're out of time. Hey, listen, you're great. You're amazing. I love you. And looking forward to wrapping up the semester. I am considering pizza at the end of the semester like I am for 3450, depending upon head count, as my last hurrah as a professor at UVU. I'm noodling on it. Maybe during finals week. We basically just rent out Nico's for 2 hours and just feed everybody pizza. Everybody maybe be okay with that? I don't know. I would love it. I'll give it some thought. Anyway, take care, my friends. Hope this is all being good.